Welcome to the Talking Risk podcast. We discuss all things risk, hazard mitigation, insurtech, industry insights, and more. I am your host, Brian Harris, and joining us today is Ralph Hines, risk control specialist with over 30 years of industry and safety experience. Welcome, Ralph.
Hey, thank you, Brian. It's good to be here.
So this is episode number 2 for us in our risk control podcast series. And today we're going to talk about trenching and excavation. This topic I thought would be relevant today because you and I recently attended a training event that was hosted by NUCA, which stands for National Utility Contractors Association, right?
Yes.
In Nashville. And we got to see a bunch of different setups, and there was a lot of, workers and contractors, TOSHA people there because we were in Nashville, vendors, and we saw a lot of neat things. So, this topic is it's important, and it's a big hazard. You run into it all the time in the field. And I know it's something that you're passionate about, right?
Yes. Yeah, and just real quick, I think I've shared this with you before, but I grew up working in trenches. So my father made me work for the sewage treatment plant, and I was the one in the trench. So um, I didn't know what the requirements were back then, but I was in that trench. I've been caved in on before, up to my knees. Have seen never seen any bad accidents, but I went to college, got a degree in safety, and went back and said, hey, I'm not working in there no more unless you protect me. So just a little story before we get started with all this.
So back then, yeah, they probably weren't following Subpart P.
Nothing.
Nice. Well, I'm going to read parts of a OSHA press release to key us up here. This is dated July 14th of this year, and it's titled "Alarming Rise in Trench-Related Fatalities Spurs U.S. Department of Labor to Announce Enhanced Nationwide Enforcement Additional Oversight." It starts off by saying in 2022's first 6 months, 22 workers have fallen victim to the deadly hazards present in trenching and excavation work, surpassing 15 in all of 2021. So with that, they have stepped up an enhanced enforcement program, if you will. It says, quoting, "To stress the dangers of disregarding federal workplace safety requirements for trenching and excavation work, OSHA enforcement staff will consider every available tool at the agency's disposal. These actions will place additional emphasis on how agency officials evaluate penalties for trenching and excavation related incidents, including criminal referrals for federal or state prosecution to hold employers and others accountable when their actions or inactions kill workers or put their lives at risk." Part of this national emphasis program, it says in here that they're going to perform more than 1,000 trench inspections nationwide, where they may stop by and inspect any excavation site during their daily duties. So OSHA says, hey, this is preventable. Workers don't need to die. We're going to go out and enforce this. They cite one particular example in the press release. It happened in Texas in June of this year. 2 workers aged 20 and 39 suffered fatal injuries in Gerald, Texas, when the unprotected trench more than 20 feet deep collapsed upon them as they worked. Trench shields, which could have saved their lives, sat unused beside the excavation.
Hmm.
So, what you have anything to comment on that, Ralph?
Yeah, that's a shame because it is 100% preventable. And by the way, them statistics ring pretty true in my experiences too, because I would estimate probably 70% of the trenches I walk up on are unprotected. And it's very scary. So I echo that sentiment. It's needed big time. And I think if we just follow the general rules, we're going home, right? Every single day. And that's our goal, right?
So, without naming names, you had a situation recently that I can recall where you went to a job site and actually stopped work. And that's not typically, like in our profession, we're not OSHA inspectors or code enforcers. We're consultants. We work with our customers. But in this case, you have a very close relationship with this customer, and you were able to take action, and it was all with the safety of the worker in mind. So maybe talk a little bit about that
Yeah,
and what you
sure. And
observed.
unfortunately, it happens more often. And it's one of the exposures that we see in our field that I just don't leave because it's a bad day. Someone could die the minute I leave. So I pulled up on a job, and we're in about a 7-foot trench, two guys in there on their knees. So, there are at least 5 foot of soil on that could potentially fall on them. No soil evaluation, competent person present, no hard hats, no protection whatsoever. And I'm just like, dudes, do you guys know how dangerous this is and everything? So I kind of gave my spiel, on what OSHA's doing, the thing that you just read, and then just, that they're more important, than getting this job done. So the foreman looked at me, and you could see it in his eyes, Brian. He was like, I know I'm wrong, but what am I to do? So the first thing we said is, hey, get the guys out. Let's get the guys out of the trench and let's walk through this. Um, and he's like, well, what do you think we could do? So I gave him some suggestions. He could have got a smaller trench box. He could have got some hydraulic shoring easily. But in the end, the easiest thing to do was to bench it, right? He had plenty of room, and it was a production issue in my mind. They had to get this done. They took a shortcut, and that's pretty common as it relates to this exposure of trenching and excavation. So I was thankful. And another thing is, do you trust the foreman and, to do what you do and to do what you say to do after you leave? So I usually don't. And I contact my contact at the office, who then puts his foot down. And so while you're there, the foreman's getting a call, and you know what the call's about, right? Because you've made
Yes.
your call. So in the end, the biggest thing is that we got it protected. But that just that has future concerns, right? Just because I was there that day, we were able to help them. But what happens tomorrow when we're not there? Are
Right.
they going to take it as serious? Soil weighs, like pretty much a small truck, right? Imagine a small truck landing on you. And when I do training, it's one of the first things I bring up, right? Is, hey, how many breaths do you get if you're stuck in a trench? And they look at me and they're like, well, probably two. Well, in round, you get one, right? The weight of the soil is going to compress your chest, and you're not going to have you're just going to sit there sucking for air, and your chest is not going to be able to expand to bring another breath in. And it would be a horrible death.
Yeah.
That's
And
preventable,
the
100%.
exactly. And you mentioned a couple things, the weight of the soil. That OSHA press release equates it to a cubic yard of soil can weigh as much as 3,000 pounds,
Yeah.
or a compact car, or a small truck.
Yes.
Um, that can that's a lot of weight.
That's a lot of weight. And it's unfortunately, there's not a lot of trench rescues, right, that are successful
Right.
because of what we're talking about.
And we've seen claims, uh, unfortunately, where workers have died
Mm.
as a result of being buried. And we've also seen claims where workers have been extremely lucky,
Yeah.
you know, and
Yeah.
those are more rare, right?
That's right.
So why leave it to chance when when you can control it?
This is Talking Risk, the risk control podcast from FCCI Insurance Group. You can listen to us online by visiting our website, fcci-group.com. Click on Risk Control and select the episode you want to hear. For FCCI teammates, go to Spike, Departments, Risk Control, Podcasts, then select the episode you want to hear. We'll be right back.
I started going through my little crate in the back of my car where we keep, resources and stuff. And I've got multiple things here that I just pulled out on my desk that, safety manuals and stuff on trenching and excavation. We have resources at our fingertips. Controlling the hazard is not rocket science.
No.
And I think maybe you hit on why we still run into this in the field where things aren't protected or not adequately protected. And more often than not, it seems that it's a production issue. Would you say that's accurate?
Yeah, I would say that's accurate, and I would throw a couple other things in. I think the other one is, it won't happen to me because it hasn't happened yet, but that doesn't hold any water with me. So I just think, Brian, what we're talking about is trenching and excavation contractors. This is their niche. This is their specialty. From our side of the table, and I believe any safety person's, thought on this whole process is they should be the experts in this. We should not have issues for when this is what you do every single day. So I do think it comes back to production and the lack of accountability or enforcement from top management, right? Because there hasn't been any losses or problems in the field until OSHA shows up or there is a bad accident.
And as we're talking about this issue, the same factors really equate to other things that we encounter from a loss standpoint, right? Why do people fall?
Yeah.
Same thing. Cutting
Same
corners, production.
Yeah.
It'll just take me a minute. I'll get up there quick, get in, get out. I'll just look at my phone while I'm driving real quick.
Yeah.
Text from the boss, boom, accident. When we cut corners or we're in a hurry, things happen. So let's shift gears a little bit and get into some of the details on hazards and controls with regard to trench work and excavations.
Sure.
So we're going to talk, the appropriate OSHA standard is 1926 subpart P, and that covers all things trenching and excavation.
Yes.
And it's pretty straightforward. Even as I was looking at Appendix F, as in Frank, has a decision tree to walk you through how to protect an excavation. So let's start maybe, and I'm just going to rattle some stuff off at you and put you on the spot.
Okay.
What's the difference between a trench? What's the difference between a trench and an excavation?
Yeah, so the trench typically is going to be more narrower and longer. The excavation is going to be wider. So typically we see both in what we do. Typically, if I'm laying pipe, I'm going to be in a trench. If I'm more of a site prep contractor, I'm probably going to have an open excavation, a lot bigger. Like a large basement or a foundation could be an example of an excavation.
Okay, yeah. I was looking through one book I have here. An excavation is a trench greater than 15 feet wide.
Yeah, yeah.
While a trench has a depth greater than width, with 15 feet as its maximum width. So that's exactly what you said. And then narrower and deeper, you get into having some of these controls that we're going to be discussing here. Some of the hazards associated with this type of work, I jotted a few down here, and tell me what you think. I wrote cave-in, falling debris, water, air quality,
Yes.
and falls.
Yes. Yep. Yeah, and when our training presentation that we put together as part of our OSHA training that we provide our customers, I went through the standard and listed every exposure. They have general requirements for exposures, which are hitting the topics you just discuss. So we have probably 20 slides in a row that goes over each of these general requirements so that the employees that we're training can have that basic understanding. Brian, when I first pull up, there's two questions I have, and there's two questions OSHA typically has that we got to get across to these guys and these questions are who's in charge, right? Who's the competent person on this site, and what kind of soil do you have, right? Because if we don't know the kind of soil we have, then we can't adequately protect it because there's certain requirements based on the different types of soils, right? Stable rock, type A, type B, and type C. So typically stable rock is the best, type C is your worst, so best to worst. So if we can't figure out them things first, chances are we're not going to properly protect this trench. So that's the key things in my mind. Okay, who's in charge, and have you been trained, and do you know what kind of soil you're dealing with?
Competent person, what differentiates them from a worker?
Sure. So in the construction standards, there are 14 separate standards that require a competent person. Now, the competent person, the definition is the same, but the requirements per standard are different because the exposures are different. So when you're talking about a competent person, he is a person who has authority to shut down the job to make it safe and to do it the right way. And that comes from top management within the company. The other requirement is he has knowledge of the exposures associated with the particular hazard, in this case being trenching. So two requirements: knowledge of what's going on and the hazards associated with it, and authority from the company.
And you mentioned soil types A, B, C.
Mm-hmm.
What are some ways that can be used on the job site to evaluate soil type?
Yeah, typically there are two requirements, two type of tests that you have to do to figure out your soil type. You have to do a manual test and a visual test. And the visual test is pretty basic. So, and I think a lot of times where we go wrong with our visual is that they're just looking at soil in general. But in order to get it correctly, what we do is when we start digging with that excavator, the first couple of pounds of soil we place 2 feet away. That's our spoil pile placement. And that's when we do our visual. So we're looking for cohesiveness. Does it look like it's moist? Does it sticking together? Does it look like it's crumbled or just going to fall apart? Is it sandy or loamy, which is going to indicate a worse type of soil? So that's our visual test. And there's multiple different physical tests we can do. We can use a pocket penetrometer, which I'm fortunate to have one. Throughout my career, I pick up things, and same you do as well. But nobody in the industry uses a pocket penetrometer. And a quick story, if I could, by the way. So I had to help a customer recently with an informal hearing, and all the OSHA officer kept saying during the competent person interview was, "Did you use a pocket penetrometer?" He did not. There's other choices, and OSHA agreed with this as well. This is one of the reasons we're able to, successfully defend this customer. But anyways, pocket penetrometer, we can do a thumb test. And the thumbprint test is grabbing a ball of soil, sticking your thumb in it. How far does it penetrate? Tells you what type of soil you have. It hardly penetrates and it's cohesive, got type A. Middle of the road, type B, and then your thumb goes right through it. That's going to be indication that it's a bad soil and a type C soil. So we could do a spaghetti test, which is what we did when we were kids, right? We grabbed some Play-Doh, we rolled it up, and if it stays together when you hold that string, then you've got good soil. If it falls apart, you got bad soil. There's a ribbon test as well. So there's just so many different tests. The ribbon test is just the same. You put the ball in your hand, you press it with your thumb, the soil is going to overlap off the side of your hand, and then if it stays together, good soil. If it falls apart, bad soil. So not very hard. Like I think you said earlier, it's not rocket science. But you do need some experience and you need some training, and then you need to be held accountable.
If there's a risk control topic you'd like us to cover, or if you have questions about FCCI's risk control services, send us an email, info@fcci-group.com. FCCI Insurance Group is a multi-regional provider of comprehensive property and casualty insurance and surety products. We cover businesses in 20 states plus Washington, D.C. Our local presence, service, and expertise combined with the knowledge and relationships of our independent agency partners creates a winning combination that sets us apart. To find an FCCI agent partner, visit our website at fcci-group.com and click Find an Agent. Are you an agent interested in working with FCCI? Visit our website at fcci-group.com and click on For Agents.
When we were at that NUCA seminar, the guys were wearing and talking about the air monitors or the samplers.
Yes.
And where to put them, on their vest up near where their mouth is. And they were small, and I don't know how much they cost, but I saw your eyes light up that you'd like to have one of those too. And so that's something else, in a trench or an excavation, in and around a manhole, air needs to be sampled and evaluated before workers get down in the trench. That, to me, in my mind, that might be something that could get overlooked when we just think of the obvious. How are we going to protect from cave-in? But air is also important. So equip your people with the right tools.
Yes.
As well as the knowledge. So we covered competent person. We covered soil type. What's next up in our list of controls? Depending on how deep we go. When do we need to provide protection?
Sure, great question. Because again, one of the things when I do trench training, we go through the general requirements, competent person, things that we've talked about. But in the end, I always close it up in the same fashion, and it's by distances, right? There's certain distances we need to remember as it relates to trenching because it's going to help us properly protect ourselves, right? So 2 foot. 2 foot is our spoil piles that we have to have from the face of the trench, because if you think about it, undue pressure or weight on the side of it, on a condition that's not natural, right? Because we've dug in the earth, it's not natural. That undue weight and pressures can potentially cause that wall to cave in, hence keeping that 2 feet away. And the same thing goes for surface encumbrances, by the way, and them are any things within 2 foot of the edge. So it could be your equipment, it could be your pipe storage, right? That I'm storing next to this because I want to get it in the trench. Again, what it's doing is adding that additional pressure. So that right there, one call, right? A lot of different other things. I kind of lost my train of thought there, but we're talking about different exposures, right?
Yeah, and I think you were going with numbers. You started with 2 foot, and then I think you were going to 4 foot and 5 foot.
Yeah, forgive me there.
That's okay.
2 foot, then 5 foot. 5 foot is when we have to start, figuring out what kind of protection we have based on the type of soil. And we need to take that with a grain of salt too, because I'm sure you heard the story about the guy in Gallatin, Tennessee, was in a 4-foot trench on his knees, tightening up a pipe when the trench collapsed and killed him. So that's where that competent person is very important, to be able to figure out, hey, if it's less than 5 feet and I got bad soil, I might still want to protect myself, right? 5 foot's the general rule, though.
And at 4 feet, what's the requirement for 4 feet?
So at 4 feet, we have to have a way in and out. We have to have egress in and out of a trench or an excavation. So 2 different things we could do. We can use a ladder, then the ladder safety requirements for extension come into play, 3 foot above where I'm getting off. And then we can use a ramp as well. As long as the earth, it's a ramp and it's easily walked up, and it's inspected by the competent person as well. So that's simply, with your bucket, tamping down to make a ramp. So that is accessible, but it has to be within 25 feet of wherever an employee is working so that he can get out of that trench in the required time period.
So we've talked about rules regarding to 2 feet, 4 feet, 5 feet, and 25 feet. What's the rule at 20 feet?
At 20 feet, the rule is that you're not allowed in the trench unless a professional engineer has designed your protection, because of the weights we're getting into now at 20 foot deep. Just big time hazardous. So we're not even allowed in there unless a professional engineer designs it. There's a couple other upper distances that we share too. 18 inches is a rule for when the bottom of your trench box has to be to hit the ground. I believe it's 18 inches. And then there is another rule when you slope your box, when you slope and you put your box in, that has to stay up to within 12 inches of where the angle takes place.
A lot of numbers, but they're pretty straightforward. And when you work with them every day, it's like riding a bike.
Yeah, and the other number we throw in there is one of the exposures you mentioned earlier is fall protection.
Yep.
So even though it's a trench, if we're 6 feet, we have to have fall protection. Now, that's a misconception because a lot of people think, hey, I got a 7 foot trench, I got to provide perimeter protection around the trench. Well, that's not the case. If you're walking over it is where your exposure occurs. So as long as you have an open trench and you're not walking over it, you're okay. The other requirement that's little known too is that if your operator cannot see the trench, then you have to have some type of stop log or some kind of something mechanical to warn him, hey, you're coming up on the trench so the equipment doesn't go in.
We've seen claims where equipment
Yeah,
moving over a trench has injured and killed workers
yeah,
from, backing over the worker in the trench or causing a cave in, worker nearby, operator can't see them. So lots of hazards. Again, going back to not being rocket science here, it's
yeah.
just taking the time to do things the right way. So we've identified the numbers relating to when we have to do certain things. We've talked about the hazards involved, the methods of control or loss prevention. I wrote down 3 words here that sort of encapsulate ways that we're going to control this stuff: slope, shore, or shield.
Okay.
Thoughts?
So sloping. Sloping is we're minimizing our exposure by sloping the edges of the trench or the walls of the trench, and it's all going to be based on, so that's important, the soil type. Remember, I mentioned that earlier. So how do we know how to slope if we don't know the soil type? Because so, type A soil was 3/4 to 1, type B soil was 1 to 1, and type C soil was 1.5 to 1. So 1.5 to 1. And a lot of people don't understand the proper way to figure that out too. And it's not rocket science there either. 1 to 1 means the depth of my trench. That's how far I'm sloping it, right? So if it's 10 foot, I'm sloping my angle 10 foot. If it's 15 foot and I'm going 1.5 to 1, well, let's use 10 foot again because it's an easy number. Then 1.5 to 1 is 15 feet that I'm going to be sloping my trench. So you can slope A, B, and C. So you can use that for any type of soil that we're in. The benching requirements are pretty much the same. They will follow along the same slopes for A, B, and C soil. So from the bottom to the top, it'll be 1 to 1, 3/4 to 1, or 1.5 to 1. And they now have apps, by the way, that you can take a picture and it will tell you the angle of your trench as long as you stand in the proper position. Um, the important thing to know about benching is that you can only bench type A and type B soil. You cannot bench type C soil because it's not cohesive enough for a bench to stay together. They'll tend to topple or slough into the trench. So we can bench it, we can slope it, and then we can shore it or shield it, right?
Yep.
And that's a trench box. That's hydraulic shoring. It's not very difficult also. And most contractors will rent this stuff, right? So like Sun Equipment, I know a guy named Jimbo, super trench guy. I call him all the time when I have questions. Um, but that's what he does. He visits job sites and just rents trench boxes. But
Mhm.
so if our customer, the example we talked about earlier with one of the customers that I've walked up on, if they would have had some simple aluminum shield right there, it would have been perfect for their job. And all they had to do was contact these guys. They're all over the
Right.
place in all the states we work in,
Yep.
to come out, and they'll be the ones that will go ahead and place it in there and train you on how to do it. So it's not like you have to know everything.
Yeah, it's Sunbelt, right? Sunbelt
Yeah.
Equipment Rental.
Yep. Sunbelt Equipment Rental.
And at the seminar, we even picked up a booklet here from National Trench Safety. These guys rent, sell. They've got resources. So if you're a contractor and you have a hazard, reach out to your insurance company or reach out to a pro
Hmm.
who's versed in the stuff. They're more than happy
Yeah.
to give you some guidance because they want to rent you equipment, and we don't
That's
want you to have a loss.
That's exactly right. And the biggest thing in my experience, and I know you can echo this, is just getting to that point where that customer trusts you, right? And
Yep.
I think you got to earn it, because, I think about, and this is true, I think, across the board. I think everyone wants to be great, right? I don't think everyone wants to put in the effort to be great, though. So that's something that, apply. What's wisdom, right? Wisdom's the application of knowledge. So these guys have this knowledge in the field, and to be able to apply it and know that you have this partner out there, whether it's trench safety or your insurance company, I think that's where we miss sometimes. And that's why I think it's important to build these relationships, boy. And, no one cares how much I know, right? Until they know how much I care.
Another Ralphism.
There you go.
All right, we should close with that, but I also want to make sure that you get to mention the app from NIOSH
Yeah.
that we had discussed before we started the podcast today. So there's a lot of resources out there, everybody, from the OSHA website to your insurance partner to equipment rental companies. Even the OSHA people are willing to help if you approach them with the right attitude and perspective. There's a lot of apps and stuff that are right at your fingertips on your phone. And Ralph, talk a little bit about the NIOSH one.
Yeah, so NIOSH has an app on our phone that allows you to evaluate a trench very simply, as long as you've been through some basic training. And they also have an interactive tool on their website for trench training, and it goes through the entire subpart P from beginning to end. It's hands-on. It provides pictures. It provides a little quiz so that you can confirm your understanding of what you're being taught. It's a wonderful tool. I share that with all the contractors. Unfortunately, I don't think a lot of them use it. Again, we go back to until you've had this kind of accident, you tend to think things are status quo and normal and it's not going to happen to me. But that's part of what we're doing, right? Trying to educate our customers. And OSHA's doing the same thing by this emphasis program on trench safety. So great app. Hey, and one other thing I wanted to mention too was the stand down for trench safety, right? That's something that NUCA in association with OSHA and other organizations, which hopefully I would love to be a part of that, and I know you do as well. But every year we do a stand down for trench safety. It's a week-long event, and it's awareness training, visiting jobs, saying, hey guys, these are your exposures. Let's walk through them. And it's just to give the guys more tools so that they go home each single day.
Ralph Hines, thanks for the discussion today.
All right, thank you. Trenching is, I just think it's 100% preventable, and that's what we're going to continue to do so these guys go home every single day.
It only takes a minute to work safe, but it pays off.
Ooh, that's right.
Right?
Yes, sir.
Stay safe. Have a great day. Thanks, buddy.
Yes, sir.
You can listen to Talking Risk online at fcci-group.com. Click on Risk Control and select the episode you want to hear. Recording copyright FCCI Services, Inc. 2022. The opinions expressed in this recording don't necessarily represent those of FCCI, its personnel, or affiliates. This recording is provided for informational purposes only, does not attempt to identify all potential hazards or remedial actions, and is not intended as legal or professional advice. FCCI, its personnel, and affiliates shall not be liable for any loss, death, damage, or expense arising out of your reliance upon this recording. You are solely responsible for complying with applicable law, including any changes in the law, and for the safety of your operations. Please consult your legal advisor with any questions or concerns. For Talking Risk, I'm Brian Harris.